You're listening to the Creative Capital Podcast. You're dying to learn about how you can create wealth through real estate investing? Then you've come to the right place. Join in every week as we go over the ins and outs of real estate investing and learn how you too can become financially free. What's going on, everybody? This is Josh Ferrari, host of the Creative Capital Podcast. And I'm really just too stoked about this show. I mean, we just finished recording it with none other than Whitney Sewell himself, the guy who runs a daily podcast and now has well over $150 million worth of assets under management. And initially, when I took the approach of the interview on the show, I was wanting to learn some of the background of kind of how he got to where he is today, what that journey was like, and how he was able to balance some of like the work-life balance. Like, how on earth can you do a daily podcast and get to the level of success you've achieved now? But it took a very pleasant spin and ended up being a show more about sacrifice, vision, passion, and clarity. Having complete and utter clarity as to the direction that you're headed and being able to make sacrifices to get to where you want to be. I mean, once you guys get into the show, you'll hear in the beginning, he talks about how he used to have a ranch, a farm with a bunch of horses on it. He used to be a professional horse trainer, buying, selling, and training horses. And he did it globally. He rode, he absolutely loved horses, and he gave it all up. Cold turkey, gave it all up, just clean, gone, sold the farm, all the horses are gone. I mean, just think about something that you're really passionate about or that you've been passionate about for a long time that you finally get the chance to do, that finally starts having success. You're making a ton of money in it. It's this awesome thing. And then realizing that there's no way you're going to be able to live the lifestyle that you want to live, have the future that you want to have if you continue along this path, in the direction that you want to head. So then just cutting that off cold turkey. I mean, the sheer courage and strength that it takes, persistence to be able to do something like that is absolutely phenomenal. So guys, I'm really stoked for you guys to be able to hear Whitney's story and hear a lot of the things that he did moving along in his journey, really get him to where he is today. And the level of clarity that he had to have, the things he had to do, the amount of time he had to spend to get to where he is, because it's really not talked about a lot. I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time in this initial forefront right here talking about what we're getting into the show, because I just want to get right into the show, but it's really not something that people talk about a lot, on the sacrifice and the time that it takes to eventually achieve success. So super stoked for you guys to hear this show. Cannot wait. I'm going to listen to it 50,000 more times. It's that good a show. Let's jump right in. Hey, what's going on, Whitney? It's so amazing to have you out on my show. I've already been on your show twice now. I actually had a 2-part series, and so I'm so stoked to finally be able to get you here on our show. How you been?
I am excellent. Grateful to be on your show, Josh. Pleasure to meet you. I was encouraged by your story. That's why I thought, man, we have 2 shows so we can learn a little more about you.
Yeah, super glad that you had me on twice. I mean, once, first of all, but then you're like, would you like to come back and do a 2-part show? It's like, yeah, sure. That'd be amazing. So for those out there that don't really know who you are and what you do, Whitney, tell folks a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in real estate.
Yes, I'll go way back, but I'll give you the quick version and ask any questions you want. But I joined the military directly out of high school. Didn't know. It was March of 2001. So it was before our nation was at war, right? We had no idea that in just a few months, actually 6 months, we'd be at war. And then found myself all of 2005 in Iraq. And unfortunately, I'm so thankful to have made it home. Not everyone in my squad made it home, unfortunately, but I'm so thankful to have done it and have served and came home. And I'm thankful to have received Soldier of the Year as well for that year while in Iraq. And so, but had no idea what I wanted to do for a career. And law enforcement seemed like a great segue from military. Out of 1,200 applicants, there were 5 positions. I was blessed to have one of those with Kentucky State Police. I loved working the road as a police officer. But quickly, about 2 years, I would have worked the first year for free if they'd let me. I mean, I really enjoyed it. But about 2 years in, I'd been married for a year or so. and quickly discovered that, this is going to be really difficult to support a family on 35,000 a year. And plus, my wife and I just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage. And so I was like, this is not what's best. As much as I enjoy this, like, this has been fun, right? This has been fun. This has been good. I enjoyed it, but this is just not what's best long term. So my wife and I started praying for, just Lord, what else can I do? I didn't have any college. And so I thought like law enforcement was it, right? So I finally learned about real estate. I can't remember how I was actually exposed to it. It was in 2009. And I found out that not just like one person had built wealth in real estate, but hundreds of thousands of people have built wealth in real estate, right? And so I thought, okay, if all those people have done it, I surely can do it as well. And I should be able to at least supplement my income, right? I didn't think that it would be like the end all, but I thought it will at least supplement my income as a police officer. We quickly purchased 2 triplexes and just made a ton of mistakes. I was self-managing, didn't do property diligence, trusted the realtor too much, trusted the seller too much. It just led, managed with my heart, helped the tenants, and it was a chaos for a long time. But finally, I received a federal agent position and just to Virginia, where we still live now. We sold those units and kept buying and selling some real estate at a very small scale, though, but got up to like a 15 unit. And I was a federal agent for about nine and a half years. And but I learned about the syndication business in probably 2016 or so, or before. And I couldn't believe I hadn't known about this so many years earlier. And so we sold everything else, including the 15 unit, and completely committed to the syndication business. And that's roughly when we started the daily podcast. And a lot of things happened since then I know we're going to talk about. But that was kind of our journey to real estate. A lot of other things, of course, happened in that time period. I had another business. I was a professional horse trainer as well. Most people don't know that. And had another business there going, had a really big name in that industry, was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined. And my wife and I also had the farm that we'd always dreamed of. And, Josh, it was a very difficult decision. My wife, and you're fixing to go to the beach, so watch out, because I'm fixing to tell you something. It's probably may scare you. You may not want to go to the beach. But there was a fall where my wife and our family, we went to the beach, and I had learned about the syndication business. We had our rentals. I had been training horses, and it was like another full-time job. We're working full-time. We had family. And while at the beach, the Lord just gave my wife and I a peace about selling everything. And we would pray, we would walk and on the beach, and just, it was just some great time with the Lord and with each other. And we came back, and within like 2.5 months, our farm was sold. Everything for the horse training business was sold. We were moving in town and bought a small house in town, and probably not the best area of town either. It took that level of commitment. I just share that to say, we sold the farm to make it happen. And that helped me to stay very focused for the next, 2.5 years until we're, about where we're at now. And so it took all those things to get to where we're at now. But anyway, go ahead.
Whitney, my goodness, that was some story. First of all, I had no idea that you had done all those things, because, I always ask every guest to send me a little short bio, and the bio had like none of that stuff in there. I didn't know you served in the military. I didn't know you were in law enforcement. The horse training was really cool. The fact that you first bought like 3 triplexes, like you're like, let's get into real estate. All right, 6 units. Here we go. We're buying it. Like the fact that you just jumped into that such an amazing story, all the stuff you've done to get to where you are today. So I want to dive into, since we're kind of discussing real estate on the show, I wanted to dive first into the triplexes. When you first found out about real estate and you're like, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to get out of the law enforcement thing. We're going to get out of all this other stuff. We're going to jump into real estate and see what that's all about. And you found these 2 triplexes. How did you find them? Where did the money come from? Like, how'd you buy them? What'd that look like?
Great question. Of course, on a $35,000 a year salary, it's not like I had a down payment just laying around, right? At the time. And so I did have an investor. I found somebody that would partner with me, believe it or not, and at that time, and purchase this property. And so they actually, they invested with me, and they also helped sign on the loan as well. That was a big part of it, right? I couldn't have done it without this individual. So that relationship was crucial. It was in a part of Kentucky where we were actually moving to at that time while I was working for state police. And so I was thinking, to be close to me and I'll be able to help manage it and those things. But ultimately, we found it through a realtor that was local to that market. We'd looked at numerous small multifamily properties, and this was just one that we thought would make sense, that we could make happen. And then obviously when the investor, when there was an investor involved, it made it a lot easier to be able to purchase. Say, buy 2 triplexes as opposed to 1 single family home or duplex.
And then so going into that and then learning everything that you learned and eventually kind of getting out of that and deciding to buy maybe the next deal or the 15 unit or whatever it was immediately after that. What did that look like when you were continuing to educate yourself and learn, okay, this is starting to work, or you were realizing all the mistakes you were making and you're like, nah, I know what not to do moving forward. So here's what maybe the direction I need to go in. What did that look like? How did you kind of figure out the direction you wanted to go? And then how are you able to execute on that?
Yeah, it was difficult. So that property, I mean, we just purchased it wrong. We didn't do good due diligence. I mean, it was just like so much brain damage, right? From that deal at that time. It was not a great experience. And I think that's why a lot of people probably quit, around that first deal, or they're just like, this landlording thing is not made for me, right? And I would say, it's not made for me either, doing even now, like that's not, I'm not the one taking those calls every day. Right. And I found out very quickly that I want to help these people, and it's hard for me to run that part of it like a business, because anyway. And so that's why we have professional management now. And so that's why too, I learned about syndication. I'm like, now that's a business model I can get behind right there. And it's something I can scale. And that's why I loved, multifamily from the beginning. It's just the scalability. But in moving from those triplexes, because of the time involved it took to manage those, it wasn't even really an option for a good while to even look for the next property, right? I mean, I had to be so involved. And then it was like, man, does this really make sense? There's no way I can take on more properties if it's going to be this involved while still being a police officer, still a growing family, all those things. It just wasn't going to work. And right. But then I became a federal agent that moved us to Virginia, where we owned a few other smaller properties, but then partnered on the 15 unit with another individual, and we had management. So that opened my eyes to this, like, well, wait a minute, I don't have to manage all these properties, and we can scale. And then it wasn't long until I learned about syndication.
That's really powerful. I think finding out what it was that you wanted to do, kind of going in that direction, figuring out kind of what your vision, what your end goal was going to be inside of real estate. And even though the first deal you did was horrendous, is what it sounds like, it taught you a lot. There was a lot of learning curves inside of there of just getting some clarity on the direction you did want to head in. Like, okay, here's maybe a lot of things we don't want to do. Here's the asset class we don't want to be in. And so it helps you to know kind of where you're going. So a lot of people see a bad deal, like what you're saying, they quit. They quit after the first deal because it's not working. But if you take a different perspective, a different look at it, you really realize this was a good thing. Seemed horrible. Maybe it was financially difficult. Maybe it was stressful on the marriage. Maybe it was this, maybe it was that. But it was really a good thing because now we know where we want to be and continue heading in that direction. I think that's something the listeners can take from your story in that particular aspect. So I wanted to jump now into your transition into multifamily, deciding you wanted to syndicate. But before I jump into that, I wanted to ask about the professional horse trading. Was that something that you and your wife just kind of like did out of the blue? Did you always have a passion for that? I'm just personally intrigued with that.
So I've had a passion to ride and train horses since I was very little. I mean, very, very little. Horses have always been just a desire of mine to be able to train and ride. And I was finally like really good at it. It came very easy to me, but it was a whole second, it was a second full-time job. I was in the arena riding and training, giving lessons till 11, 12 o'clock at night, most nights, while still working full-time. And so I was doing clinics all over the country. And, like I said, I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined that I would be able to. I was doing, just tricks and all kinds of things, just being able to make horses do things I never thought were even possible. And so it came very easy. However, that fall, like, so when we went to that beach, the writing was just on the wall, like as good as I can get at this industry and as popular as I have become and will, it's never going to be passive. Right. It's never going to be passive. I was always going to have to be the one training the horses. I was always going to have to be putting in 60 hours a week, at the arena or the barn, whatever, to make a really good living. And so it was like, okay, as good as this is, I've got to just like cut it off completely. And that's what we did. Because I knew if we had kept the farm, I could have said, okay, I'm just going to have 1 or 2 horses and maybe just do it a little bit here and there. But that would have slowed down the syndicate business in a big way. A big distraction. And I knew that. And I knew to be just completely gung-ho with the commercial real estate business, I had to just take a break from that. I knew it wouldn't be forever, right? But I had to say, you know what? This is what's best. This is what's going to help us to get there the fastest. And so we did. We had to everybody thought we were crazy. I had probably the best JOB that anybody in my family had ever had. And so that was difficult, right, for them to understand, wait a minute, or why are you doing this real estate thing, especially when I decided to leave federal agency. And so that was a big transition for all of us. But the horse thing was just a big part of my passion since I was a little boy, but we had to give it up to do what was best. And now we're about to get horses again, just so everybody knows.
That's so awesome. And I think that takes a lot of courage and strength to be able to just cut it off, basically cold turkey, and say, nope, we're not going to do this thing anymore at all, because it's not going to help us get where we need to be. But it sounds like you also had in your mind, yes, we're cutting it off for now. It's going to be like a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. I'm going to be able to then pay more attention to grow this business, get where we want to be on the more permanent passive side. And then the horses can be a hobby later, once we've already got this thing up and running. I think that's really awesome. So now jumping into the meat and potatoes of the show, I wanted to ask, why multifamily? What was the draw? It sounded like passive income majorly, but what exactly was your draw to that niche? And then how did you really start doing syndications?
Yeah. So in 2009, even when I was first learning about real estate, no idea about syndication, I was never attracted to really single family homes or building a portfolio of single family homes. That just wasn't what I was attracted to, just because of the scalability. I thought, if I want to do it, if I can buy a duplex or triplex as opposed to a single family, well, why not? As many units as one time. That was just my thought process at the time. And that's, kind of stuck with me. But, obviously everybody needs a place to live. Everybody hears that all the time. We love multifamily for numerous the same reasons. But for me at the time, it was the scalability, and it's still been. And now learning about syndication, now we're able to take 150, 200 investors per deal with us and help them to build wealth at the same time. And so just the scale of business as well, being able to build a team of professionals. I'm not taking those management calls anymore, right? That wasn't what I was good at, and not what I just loved doing. But there are people that are really good at that and love doing that. And that's who we want on our team, right? As part of that team. And so now, I've built a team of people that are really good, some of the best at what they do. And it's allowed us to scale and allowed me to really be really good at what I'm good at. You're right, focus there.
So now you're headed in the right direction. You know what you want. You're in the multifamily. You got the passive income. You're getting ready to get horses again. The hobbies, everything's kind of falling in line. So real quick, wanted to ask, what was the journey from starting the syndication business to now having $150 million in assets under management in just 4 years? I mean, you don't have to go in super detail, but walk us through what that journey was like.
Yeah, it's what everybody wants to know about. It's not for everybody, to say the least, or the way that I did it anyway. It's been quite the journey, quite insane, to put it mildly. And, and 100 million of that was just last year, just to put that out there. And so, the first 2 years, we didn't buy anything. I mean, it was just, people don't see that, right? All the hustle, all the time spent, all the appointments, all the emails, all the traveling for 2.5 years before it really takes off. And so right away, we decided to do a daily podcast, and I wouldn't recommend that for just anybody either. I know you and I discussed it a little bit, but it's just insane, right? I mean, it is insane. If we had stayed on that farm, I don't believe I would have been able to keep up. And to say, like, that was our passion. That was, we wanted to be out on a farm. And so moving to town just helped me to focus further out, right? Like, we've got to get back out there, wherever it is, we got to get back out there. So we bought that house in town, and I put up in the corner of the basement. It's like an old house. There's a window up high, and you could see outside, but I put a corner office or 2 walls up and made it an office. And I mean, that's where I lived for like 2.5 years. And so what was so difficult too, is I had 2 days off a month, or every other Monday I was off from my day job with the federal government. And those days is when I would record interviews, and I would record them in the afternoons as well. But my team knew that they needed to schedule 12 to 15 interviews a day. Okay. So I would start, they knew, like, that's what it takes. And if I couldn't get them done, if I couldn't get enough people signed up, then I would have to do 4 or 5 in the afternoon through the week as well, right? But those days I would call my marathon days, and it would be, it was nonstop, just as hard as I can go. I would still do investor calls. I may still be interviewed on like 2 other podcasts as well, even after a dozen of my own shows. And so it was just really a mindset thing, and that's one thing I say, the military taught me to have that never give up mentality. It's a mindset. People say, I hear people say, if I have to do 3 shows in a day, I'm just wore out. And well, that's your mindset, right? If I told you had to run a marathon 6 months from now, well, you're going to start working towards that, right? You're going to think, oh my goodness, how am I going to do that? But the day before, if I said, you know what, Josh, it's just going to be 12 miles instead of 26, whatever, you're going to think, shoo, okay, I can do that, right? But if I'd told you 12 in the first place, you'd have still been just as worried about it. Right. And so it's all about your mindset. And I just had to have a mindset of, that's just what it takes. Let's just get it started. So by having that mentality as well, I knew also that I couldn't keep up if I was going to do it all myself. If I had done a weekly show, I know that I would have tried to learn how to edit audio, edit video. I would have been doing all that myself, writing the show notes. I probably would have gotten very frustrated and gotten behind. The quality would have been very poor in trying to keep up, right? Very frustrated. And so knowing that I couldn't keep up with the daily show, overcommitting really helped me to know that I had to build a team. And so I hired 4 VAs from all over the world, including an assistant that was in Virginia, closer to me anyway. Having that team allowed me to manage and make that happen. But it was a massive sacrifice for my wife and kids. I call them my hidden team members. People don't talk about it much, but it was very difficult for them because my kids knew that Sundays was the day that dad was available. I mean, I missed most meals for 2 years or more with the family. And so it was a massive sacrifice. And I mean, I remember looking out that window in my basement and watching my boys playing in the backyard. And it was so difficult for me. I wanted to be out there, right? I mean, I wanted to be out there, but I had to be able to remember that picture, right? Where we're going and keep that in mind, because I would be in there till 10 o'clock midnight most nights. So anyway, all that to say, it was well worth it, but I also had to paint that vision for them. Right. I had to help them to see where we're going and why dad's working so hard. And so all that happened, like I said, 2.5 years. I mean, I would be traveling, 1 to 2 weekends a month all over the country to different conferences while still doing a daily podcast, while still working full time. We went through our 3rd adoption during this time as well. It was a lot, but it can be done.
I think that was a really powerful story. I think really we could just end the show now, just on that note. All right, signing off. No. That's huge because there are a lot of people that don't ever see the back end labor, work, and struggle that people go through to achieve the level of success that they've achieved. They just look at them and they're like, oh, well, they've only been doing this for 3 months, or, everything's been easy for them. They've got money from that they grew up with, or their parents were wealthy, or they had connections to this, or whatever it is. People always want to make excuses for the reason behind folks being successful. But if you really take a deep dive into that individual's life and the path that they took to actually get there, more often than not, it was an extreme struggle to get there. I think that just goes back to what you've had the whole entire time, your whole entire life, ever since back in 2001 when you started in the military, and then now where you are today, consistently having the vision of where you wanted to be and where you knew you wanted to go. And so then from that vision, you were able to kind of reverse engineer and figure out what exactly you needed to do and how labor intensive that was really going to be. And yes, you chose maybe the more difficult path, but I think it helped you also because you have a higher level of success than most because you chose to struggle through that short-term 2, 3, 4 years throughout that time frame. So I think it's really powerful. So with that said, I guess I want to know real quick, why daily episodes? You wanted to start the podcast. You said you started it, and you think because of that, you were able to force yourself to hire folks to do it. Otherwise it was going to be really crappy quality or what have you. But was there anything in your mind that thought, if I do this daily podcast, I'll have more consistent or more rapid growth in my actual business? What was the entire thought process behind daily?
Yeah. So before starting a podcast, I wasn't even hardly listening to podcasts. A few months before starting one, I almost didn't even know what a podcast was. I mean, it was this, new thing to me, but I also knew of, somebody else in the industry who had mass success by having a daily podcast, and I knew only 1 or 2 other people, even in other industries at the time, that had daily podcasts who had great success. Right. And I'm like, okay. I mean, it was almost as simple as I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Let's just figure out how they did it. Right. Let's just figure out how to make it happen. And it was really that simple at that time. It's okay, We'll figure it out. I can do this. I can make this happen. And over time, of course, I've learned that like overcommitting like that did push me in a lot of ways that I would have never gotten to. I would have never learned. I would have never been pushed in ways that it made me. But doing 7 a week as opposed to 1, well, think about just that many more connections, right? It's such a networking tool. Like Josh, a month ago, you and I had never met, and now we've been on Zoom 3 times. So that's happened almost 1,000 people on our show now, right? You think about all those connections. And so it quickly built a brand. It quickly built credibility for myself. It took a while, but in a year's time, most people in this industry knew who I was. Another year's time, most people knew my story. That doesn't happen that fast with every show, especially if it's a weekly show. But doing it daily, just the daily fact alone impresses most people, even investors, that we can even make that happen, right? Again, I would recommend it for everybody because it takes a ton of time. It still takes a ton of time, but well worth it just for the relationship component, if nothing else.
So Whitney, how do you balance it now? Now that you are where you are today, you've kind of got a lot of systems and processes in place for the actual business side of things and continuing to grow acquisitions and everything else that goes in with multifamily syndication. How are you able to balance your daily podcast, work, and then family life while doing all that all at the same time?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's always a struggle, right? And my assistant and we've been working very hard, and we always are, about my calendar. Where is my time best spent? And I'm always looking at that, and I'm just always revamping my time. Like, where is it best spent? How do I minimize this thing over here that's taking too much time to do these other more higher priority things, right? And initially, it was just me, right, doing mostly everything, not the production side of I've never edited the first piece of audio or video, by the way, believe it or not, but that's just not the best use of my time, right? But now, obviously, we have a great team. I've had numerous assistants, and I have just a top-notch assistant, and that's a whole nother show as far as how I found her and how I hired her and all that. But we have numerous team members now. I have somebody that all she does is assist me, making sure that I'm where I need to be and I'm prepared and all those things, making sure I'm responding, making sure I'm not seeing emails that aren't necessary for me to see, wasting time on that, right? I get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day, but I may need to respond to 12. Even just minimizing that, something like email was such a big burden for me for 2.5 years and just took way too much time. But now my week is very structured, very structured. I may have a day of just team member meetings and maybe a couple of interviews on other podcasts, another day or 2 days or half days where I'm interviewing folks just like yourself, that are experts in this business, amongst other investor calls and other meetings. And then I'll have another 1.5 to 2 days of just investor calls every week. That's a big part of the business. My every week is very similar to that, unless I'm traveling to do due diligence or see a property or for a conference or something like that.
I actually listened to a podcast the other day that was talking about emails and how you really get caught in the minutia of thinking that you're really accomplishing a lot when you're responding to all these emails. Like, yeah, I'm just going to go check my inbox real quick, respond to all these emails. You might have 100, 200, 300 emails that you're responding to. And then you look at the clock and you're like, wow, it's been an 8-hour day. And all I did was respond to emails. What else could you have done with your time? Or what's a better way to like streamline that process rather than just responding to folks all day, every day? So I think the fact that you were able to zero in on that and realize early on that that was an issue, that was something that you needed to kind of automate in order to grow to where you are today. I think there's a lot in this show that people can learn from you. I
had 800 important and unread emails in my inbox. That doesn't count everything else, in that bottom section in Gmail, just an important and unread. And then when I hired my assistant, like within a month, we were down to like 15. And now we like categorize them. And now there's like 3 or 4 sections where I know what I need to do. Ones that I have to see, ones that I just need to view. There's different things where she knows how to categorize them and manage that so I can focus on other things. Because that's stressful to me. Like I want to ensure I'm getting back to investors as quick as I can. And all those, that's just a massive burden when all that's sitting there like that. I'm like, oh boy, how long am I going to have to stay up tonight?
Wow. I honestly like to talk to you more about that because I'm trying to kind of zero in on a lot of the emailing side of things. So, but anyhow, getting back to the show, kind of wrapping things up before we jump into the next 2 segments. If you could do it all over again, what one thing, if anything, would you change to make things, I don't know, better or streamlined or what have you?
I've been asked that a few times. And one thing that would have made it better is to have figured out a way to do 2 shows a day instead of 1. I don't think it would have been good for my health, but but it would have been better for the business probably. But anyway, I think too, like painting a better picture of the sacrifice maybe early on for my family. But honestly, I didn't know either how like dedicated I was going to have to be to make it happen. And I think maybe some better preparation there for our family component would have been helpful because it was just a massive sacrifice. I think just within the home, it's so important that you're supported well, right? When you're working 2 full-time jobs. And I mean, my wife was just amazing. I mean, so supportive, still is. She did everything in the home for those 2 years, everything, while I'm just working, 2.5 full-time jobs, right? I mean, everything, including us going through an adoption and our third. I mean, it was just madness, newborn, into the home all at the same time. And so, understanding some of that and maybe some ways to structure that a little better, thinking through having time that my boys knew that dad's available. That was very important to them. Once I learned that, hey, I need to do that. So like, even though they don't see me for many days, even though I'm at home, they don't see me, they can still look forward to like Sunday or Saturday night or, like that understanding some of that early on, I think would have been helpful just in the family component, just, I don't know, for that atmosphere and to love them, even though we're going through this time of sacrifice so we can, do something a lot bigger.
I love that the one thing you said you wish you could have done better is family. I feel like a reoccurring topic here is that family is extremely important to you. You really don't like that it took so long and that you had to sacrifice for so long to get where you are today, but you're still glad you did it. You're glad you did it for your family.
Oh, yes.
For your future, for their kids and their kids' kids, like future generations. And I think it's really important. It's really important to have a why and a reason and a passion behind what you want to do. Because it sounded like you did actually have a passion for some of the other things you're doing, like horse training and whatnot. But you were like, nah, I really want to provide for my family. Like that's the main goal here. And so you knew what you needed to do.
Do you know about our foundation?
I don't. Tell me about the foundation.
I'll be quick. That's really our big why behind Lifebridge Capital is the Lifebridge Foundation. And so our whole goal from the very beginning was to commit half of our profits to this foundation. And so the foundation began during the fall of last year. So that was a big answered prayer. And now that foundation's whole mission is to help other families be able to afford to adopt children. And so my wife and I, I've been through the process 4 times. We had 1 failed placement. We have 3 children, amazing children through adoption. The Lord has just been so kind to our family through adoption. But unfortunately, it can cost $40,000 to $60,000 to bring a child home through adoption. And there's 160 million orphans in the world. It's just insane, right? That there's that burden there that most families can't overcome. So my wife and I schedule calls with couples often who just want to ask about our experience, and we help them through the adoption process or think about fundraising and things like that. But when we say it could cost $40,000 to $60,000, they say, "Well, Whitney, that's more than I'm making a year. How can we do that?" Right? I mean, they're just like halted. It's so unfortunate. And so that's where the Lifebridge Foundation will help families fund and actually pay for, large portions of their adoption. We just want to help them as much as possible so they'll commit to bringing their child home.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. One last question before we jump in the next segment. Where is Lifebridge Capital headed in the future? Sounds like you got the foundation, you got the why, things are moving, things are working for you. All these years of work has led to now 150 million assets under management. Where are you guys headed? Do you have any big goals this year for 2021?
We hope to we did 4 large deals last year. We did 6 large deals this year. Potentially, I think one other goal for our team this year would be to move into another market and potentially even another asset class. But I'm fine if we don't get into another asset class this year, but we would like to get into another market and, like I said, do at least 4 to 6 deals. We're very patient about those deals. 2 deals last year we turned down and they came back to us. We got $3 million discounts on 2 different deals last year, just by saying, this is what we'll give. And they said, no, they won't get it. And we said, okay. And they turned around and came back after it fell out of contract, with somebody else. So we just want to be patient, but that would be a goal.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Jumping in the next segment of the show now, called the Pod Decks segment. Now, for the listeners out there that don't really know what that is, it is a company called Pod Decks who just creates decks of cards. They probably got hundreds of different decks of cards at this point, but we're going to pick this stack here called the interview deck, and we're going to shuffle through it here. I'm just going to be going through it like this, like pick a card, any card. You're going to pick 2, and then we're just going to ask whatever the heck it says. So tell me when to stop.
Now. now.
Wait till we get to the back. Huh? I see your tactic, strategy here. All right. Ready for this first question?
Go.
What advice would you give yourself 3 years ago and 3 years from now?
That's two questions, right?
Well, but it's inside one card.
I think we kind of answered it about the family stuff, 3 years ago. I think knowing what I know now, back then, if I had realized just, what the Lord had in store, maybe just would have been prepared the family better. Maybe would have been more intentional about family moments going into a season of a big sacrifice for all of us. One thing would have been our move was extremely hectic. We moved between Christmas and New Year's when we sold our farm, and we would not have done that probably. But 3 years from now, I hope that our focus is serving the Lord and serving our families and serving our investors, and I hope I would just say stay focused on that and stay focused on not just massive growth in real estate, but really running the best business we possibly can and really treating others like we want to be treated, right? I mean, it's really that simple, preferring others over ourselves. And that's what we're trying to teach our kids. That's what I want to model for them, and in our business as well. So that's what I would just continue to advise myself 3 years from now. Hey, are you preferring others? Is your focus in the right place? Is it God? Is it family, wife, kids, and then business? Are those things still in check? Are you still discipling other people? Are you still bringing other people up with you? That's what I hope 3 years from now that I can still have in my scope.
Love it. Powerful. All right. Last question. What's left on your bucket list?
The first thing that just came to mind was go on a big cattle roundup out west somewhere.
I don't even know what that is. What is a cattle roundup?
Just on horseback, rounding up, cattle over thousands of acres and camping, riding horseback and camping and, herding up, lots of cattle over hundreds of thousands of acres.
That sounds like fun. That sounds like it'd be cool. All right. Now, jumping into the last segment of the show called the Core Four, same 4 questions we ask every guest. First question being, what is your favorite real estate related book?
If I have to pick one, I would say Joe Verilis's book, The Best Ever Apartment Syndication Book. If you want to go real deep in certain parts of real estate or syndication, it may not be the book, but if you want to get a great overall, just picture of the syndication business and lots of things as you're getting started, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, I love that book. I remember reading it and being like, thought leadership platform. What the heck is that? That was one of the things that was a big shock for me, I guess, in where I was. But yeah, definitely a powerful book. All right, next question. What do you think your unique skill is that helped you become successful?
I think it's just knowing the Lord. Ultimately, He's been my rock through all this, no doubt about it, and opened so many doors that I could not have opened. And I think one skill that's been crucial has been just being real and being able to relate to people and them seeing that passion in us, for adoption and those things outside of business. There's a connection there. I just think, the Lord's done that, but that's been a unique skill set, just being able to network and meet people and it not just be business.
Yeah, God is definitely a unique skill. He's definitely something or someone who you need in your corner, for sure. Okay, next question. Tell me something that's true about real estate that almost nobody agrees with you on.
First thing that comes to mind there is people that advised me. They were caring about me when they told me this, and I still hear it. The limiting belief of that you have to start small. I don't think you have to. Sometimes, I guess more times than not, people do, and they believe they do, and it does work out, and they eventually do bigger deals. But I don't believe you have to start there. Not everybody can start with bigger deals, or as fast as maybe we did or you have. But I believe that it's a limiting belief to think you have to start small.
Yeah, just partner with the right people.
That's right.
Be surprised what you can make happen. Okay. What one piece of advice would you give to our listeners wanting to succeed in real estate investing?
One would be have a mentor. Find a mentor. I was very hesitant to pay for a mentorship. And, I think it was like $12,500. And at the time, my wife and I we were fixing to have to put out like $40,000 to $50,000 for an adoption. And we were like, I don't know if we should do this. This is a lot of money. we just thought, should we like pay this much for a mentor? We don't know if this is going to be worthwhile but I did a lot of research and found a mentor. That's a whole nother story, but having that mentor was crucial. I mean, that to be mentored by that person now is 50 grand or more. It was a great investment. Never regret investing in yourself.
I like that. Never regret investing in yourself. All right. You heard it here first, folks. Whitney, if anybody wants to learn more about you and your business, how can people get in touch with you?
Lifebridgecapital.com. You can email me, Whitney, at lifebridgecapital.com. You can call or text me at 540-585-4338. Love to hear from you.
Whitney, I feel like we have shifted the topic here and of the show in a very positive way. I initially had one angle we were going at this. You took it another way, and it was honestly better than the angle I thought we were headed. So thank you for coming out on the show, for doing that daily podcast and being an amazing host and guest. And thank you for taking the time to come out on the show.
My pleasure, Josh. It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Absolutely. All right, man. We'll see you later. Guys, what did you think? I mean, I am just dumbfounded at the level of success he's been able to achieve, the persistence, the vision, the clarity, the courage, the strength that he's had to press on day in and day out for the last decade. You know, he's been, I believe he said 2009 was really when he got into real estate. And so here it is, 2021. It's been 11 years he's been in the business. And it was really on the last 2 years that he started seeing significant success and growth. But it took him 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years before that to get to this point. So I'm so glad that he was able to come on and share his story. So thankful that he actually did take the time to come out and share. And guys, go give him a listen. Go check his daily show out. I mean, he does a phenomenal show. We talked earlier about how I was on there twice. Go check my show out, hear my story. If you haven't already heard it on our show, if not, you can probably go to some earlier episodes on the Creative Capital show, listen to my story. And guys, that's all I got. So glad he came out. So glad that you guys came out and listened. So if you really love the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. It'll help tremendously with the continued growth of our show and continuing to educate others on how to be successful and all the different creative strategies there are inside of real estate investing. With that, this is Josh Ferrari signing off.